Picture this. You are driving home after dinner with your family. The night is ordinary. Maybe you are tired. Maybe you are thinking about work tomorrow or what your kids said at the table. And then you see it, red and blue lights in your rearview mirror, flashing, getting closer. And then you hear the short burst of a siren telling you to pull over. Your stomach drops. Now, in your mind, you are already running through it. Was I speeding? Did I roll that stop sign? I don't think I did anything wrong. And for most people, that mental checklist ends there. You pull over. You roll down the window. You decide, almost instinctively, to be helpful, to be cooperative, to be transparent. Because you are a law-abiding person, and you have nothing to hide. And then the officer leans in and says those 4 words, "Any weapons in the car?" Here is what most people do next. They answer, fully, immediately, sometimes even eagerly, because they think that transparency is their friend. They think that honesty will speed this up, that cooperating means explaining, that a good attitude means answering every single question. And that instinct, that completely natural, completely understandable instinct, is exactly how they hand an officer the perfect justification to take control of the stop, order them out of the vehicle, and start searching. I am going to tell you exactly what to say instead. 1 sentence, clean, legal, and protective. But before I give it to you, I need to explain something that most people never learn until it is too late. Because the rules are not the same everywhere in this country, and the state you are driving through changes everything about how you answer that question. Stick with me. This matters more than you think. My name is Robert, and I am a criminal defense attorney. I have been practicing law for over 15 years, and a significant portion of my career has been spent on exactly this kind of case. Traffic stops that escalated, searches that should never have happened, charges that stemmed not from what someone did wrong, but from what they said when they didn't have to say anything at all. I have sat across from clients who were legal gun owners, people who followed every rule, people who did everything right, and watched them face serious legal exposure because of a single conversation on the side of the road. That is why I make content like this. Not to help people hide things, not to teach people how to be difficult or obstructive, but because knowing your rights is not suspicious. Knowing your rights is something every American is entitled to. And the officer who gets upset when you exercise yours is exactly the officer you need to be most careful around. So let us get into it. Before we talk about firearms specifically, let us talk about what a traffic stop actually is, legally speaking, because there is a lot of misinformation floating around and some of it can genuinely make your situation worse. When you are pulled over, you have obligations. In virtually every state in this country, you are required to provide your driver's license, your vehicle registration, and your proof of insurance when an officer requests them. That is it. That is the list. Not a life history. Not your travel itinerary. Not an explanation of where you came from or where you are going. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You have heard about the right to travel. You have seen videos online about how you do not need a license if you are not engaged in commerce, or how the roads belong to the people. I need to be direct with you about this because it matters. That interpretation of the law has been tested in courts across the country, and it has failed, consistently and completely. The right to travel is a real constitutional protection. What it protects is your right to move freely between states, to be welcomed as a citizen in any state you enter. It has nothing to do with operating a motor vehicle without a license. Nothing. and the people who try to invoke it at traffic stops do not end up winning the argument. They end up with additional charges for obstruction, for failure to identify, and sometimes much worse. The roadside is not the courtroom. It is not the place where you win legal debates. The mindset that actually protects you is simpler and more powerful than any legal argument. Comply physically. Protect yourself verbally. Do not fight the stop. Do not argue about whether the stop is valid. Hand over your documents. Keep your hands visible. Narrate your movements if you need to reach for anything. Officer, my registration is in the glove box. How would you like me to proceed? That is how you handle the first 60 seconds of a traffic stop. And then the question comes, do you have any weapons in the vehicle? The answer to that question, legally speaking, depends entirely on where you are. And this is the part that most people, even people who carry legally, do not fully understand. There is no single national rule. There is no federal answer. What matters is the state you are in at the moment of that stop. Think of it in 3 distinct categories, because that is genuinely the clearest way to understand it. The first category is what lawyers call duty to inform. In these states, if you are carrying a firearm, you are legally required to tell the officer when you are stopped, without waiting for them to ask. Texas is probably the most well-known example of this. If you have a license to carry in Texas and you get pulled over, you disclose that you have a firearm as part of the stop. It is not optional. It is not a judgment call. It is the law. Failing to do it can turn a traffic stop into something much more serious. So if you are in a duty to inform state, you disclose clearly, calmly, and early. Officer, I want to let you know that I have a valid carry permit and there is a firearm in the vehicle. That is it. Say it plainly and let them respond. The second category is inform if asked. These are states where you are not required to volunteer the information, but if the officer directly asks you whether you have a weapon, you may be required to answer honestly depending on your specific permit status and the exact language of the state statute. New York and Florida both have provisions that operate in this general space, though the specifics vary. If you are in one of these states and the officer asks, you answer, yes, I have a carry permit and there is a firearm in the vehicle. Direct, factual, done. The third category is no duty to disclose. In states like Indiana, the law does not require you to tell an officer about a legally owned and legally carried firearm. You have the option of remaining silent on the question. The law does not compel you to answer. And this is where most of the real danger lives. Not in the duty to inform states where the rules are clear, but in the no-duty states where people have the most options and where the temptation to explain yourself is the highest. Because having options does not mean the conversation is safe. It means the conversation is a choice. And if you make the wrong one, the consequences can follow you for a long time. Here is what I want you to understand about why that conversation gets dangerous so quickly. The moment an officer learns there is a gun involved, the stop changes. This is not a judgment on any individual officer. It is human psychology layered on top of years of training, and it operates almost automatically. When you say the word gun, even in the most calm and cooperative way imaginable, several things happen simultaneously inside that officer's mind. First, threat perception spikes. It does not matter that you are lawful. It does not matter that your permit is valid and your record is clean. The officer's training tells them that an unknown person plus a firearm equals a threat assessment situation. Adrenaline increases, caution increases, and most importantly, the desire for control increases. And control in a traffic stop context, looks very specific. It looks like step out of the vehicle. It looks like keep your hands where I can see them at all times. It looks like I am going to secure that firearm. And those are not requests. Those are commands, and they are commands the officer has legal authority to give once officer safety is on the table. Second, the officer's legal toolbox gets larger. Once officer safety becomes a factor in the stop, officers have expanded authority. They can order you out of the vehicle. They can conduct a pat-down if they believe you may be armed and dangerous. In some circumstances, they can perform what is called a limited weapon sweep of the areas of the vehicle you could reach toward. None of this requires a full probable cause finding. It just requires the officer to articulate a reasonable belief about safety. And the easiest way for an officer to build that articulation is through your own words and your own behavior. Think about what that means. Every answer you give becomes raw material. He seemed nervous. His explanation of where he was going was inconsistent. He made movements toward the center console. The area is known for high crime activity. His answers kept changing. Some of these observations can contradict each other. Some of them can seem silly in isolation. But the law allows an officer to take a collection of individually innocent-seeming factors, combine them with their training and experience, and use that combination to justify the next step. So the more you talk, the more material they have to work with. Third, the questions the officer asks after that first disclosure are not small talk. They are not curiosity. They are a structured method of either obtaining your consent to search or generating enough suspicion to justify doing it anyway. This is the part that people do not realize until they are watching it happen in a courtroom on a body cam video. Every question has a purpose, and the answers you give are being evaluated in real time. Let me tell you about two people. Both of them legal gun owners. Both of them pulled over for minor traffic infractions. Both of them carrying a licensed firearm in their vehicle. I am going to call them David and Marcus. David is 44 years old. He has had his carry permit for 6 years. He has never been in any serious legal trouble. And when the officer asks him if there are any weapons in the car, David does what David has always done in every aspect of his life. He is thorough. He explains, "Yes, officer, I have a 9mm in the center console. I have a valid permit. I've had it for years. I'm very responsible with it. I shoot regularly at a range. I always keep it secured when I'm driving." He figures that the more context he provides, the more comfortable the officer will be, the smoother this will go. What actually happens is that he has just told the officer exactly where the firearm is. The officer orders him out of the vehicle. The officer secures the firearm. The officer begins asking follow-up questions. Where are you coming from tonight? Have you been drinking? Is there anything else in the vehicle I should know about? David, still trying to be helpful, keeps answering. He mentions he came from a bar. He had one drink, he clarifies, just one. The officer smells something. Not alcohol necessarily, but opportunity. 20 minutes later, David is standing on the side of the road, watching his car get searched. Nothing illegal is found, but the stop lasted 45 minutes. David is rattled, and he has no idea how close he came to a much worse outcome if anything questionable had been in that vehicle. Now think about Marcus, 38 years old, carry permit, same stop, same question. Marcus has done one thing David never did. He learned the rules before he needed them. When the officer asks, "Any weapons in the car?" Marcus takes a breath. Officer, I'm going to invoke my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer questions beyond providing my documents. The officer pushes back. Sir, I'm just asking if there's a weapon in the vehicle. Marcus does not waver. I understand, and I respect that you're doing your job. I'm not going to answer questions beyond my documents, and I do not consent to any searches. The officer takes his license and registration, runs the check, comes back clean, issues a warning for the lane change. Marcus drives away in under 12 minutes. Same situation, completely different outcome. The difference was not luck, it was preparation. Now let us walk through the specific moments where people most often talk themselves into a search, because the tactics are consistent and they work on almost everyone who does not know what to watch for. The first one is the origin question. Where are you coming from tonight? This feels innocent. It feels like small talk, but it is not. It is the opening move in building a narrative. If you say you came from a bar, that is leverage. If you say you came from a part of town the officer associates with drug activity, that is leverage. If your answer conflicts with something on your registration, that is leverage. Your safe response to that question is not an explanation. It is simple. I respectfully decline to answer questions beyond providing my documents. I plead the Fifth. It sounds more formal than the situation feels, and that is exactly the point. It names the right. It makes it unambiguous. It leaves no room for misinterpretation. Some people prefer to say, I don't answer questions. I understand the appeal, but be careful. That phrasing can come back in uncomfortable ways later. Because you will answer questions. You will answer questions if you end up in a courtroom. You will answer questions from your attorney. Saying, I plead the Fifth is precise. It asserts a constitutional protection. The second moment is the direct question about contraband. Is there anything illegal in the car? This one feels like a trap because it is a trap. If you say no and they find anything, even something that does not belong to you, even something a passenger left behind, even something you genuinely did not know was there, your denial can now be used as evidence of deception. And before you tell me you know everything in your car, I want to push back on that. Do you know what is between every seat cushion? Do you know what might have fallen under a seat from a previous passenger? Can you account with absolute certainty for every item in your trunk? Most people cannot. And claiming you can is a gamble with odds you should not be willing to take. I plead the Fifth closes that trap. The third moment is the consent request. You wouldn't mind if I just took a look, right? This is the most manipulative version because of how it is framed. It implies that refusing is suspicious. It implies that a reasonable, innocent person would just say yes. It is designed to make you feel like declining makes you look guilty. But here is the truth. You do not prove your innocence by consenting to a search. You prove nothing except that you gave up your rights. Your response is 4 words. I do not consent. Say it clearly. Say it in a way the body cam captures. I do not consent to searches. Then stop talking. That statement is unambiguous. There is no version of that phrasing that can be twisted to mean you said yes. The fourth moment is the dog threat. I'll just have a canine unit come out. Let me explain what the law actually says here, because this matters. An officer cannot legally extend a completed traffic stop solely to wait for a drug dog to arrive without having independent reasonable suspicion that a crime is occurring. The stop has a natural endpoint, and once the officer has completed the purpose of the stop, Your continued detention requires a new justification. The dog threat is often used to pressure people into consenting because officers know that many people who would otherwise refuse will say, "Fine, just search," to avoid the wait. Do not do it. I do not consent to searches. Like a broken record, every single time. The fifth moment is what I call the attitude bait. Some officers, when they are frustrated or when they sense resistance, will shift their tone. They will become sharp, dismissive, even a little aggressive. And they are watching you. They are watching to see if you raise your voice, if you start reaching for things without narrating. If you say something impulsive like, "Fine, I don't even care. Go ahead and look." That kind of statement can be interpreted as consent. The emotional response is exactly what gives them what they need. Your only job is to be a broken record. Polite, calm, short, consistent. Because if this ends up in a courtroom, juries watch body cam footage, and the person who maintained their composure while the officer escalated looks very different than the person who lost theirs. So here is exactly how this plays out from start to finish if you are carrying a legally owned firearm. You get pulled over. You pull over safely. If it is nighttime, you turn on your interior dome light. You keep your hands visible on the steering wheel. When the officer approaches, you greet them respectfully. You hand over your license, registration, and proof of insurance. If you are in a duty to inform state, you say it now. "Officer, I want to inform you that I have a valid carry permit and there is a firearm in the vehicle." Say it plainly. Tell them where it is, and then stop. Do not explain, do not justify, do not expand. If you are in an inform if ask state and they ask, you answer the same way. Clean, factual, and brief. If you are in a no-duty state and they ask, you now have a choice. And the safest choice, unless you have a specific reason to disclose, is to invoke your Fifth Amendment right. When the follow-up questions come, and they will come, your response does not change. I respectfully decline to answer further questions. I plead the Fifth. For the consent question, I do not consent to searches. If the stop drags on and it feels like you are being detained beyond the scope of the stop, you are allowed to ask two questions. Am I being detained? And am I free to go? Ask them calmly. Ask them on repeat if necessary. Those questions force the officer to either justify continued detention or let you leave. Now, here is a rule I cannot emphasize strongly enough. If the officer wants to secure the firearm, let him. Do not argue about it. But here is the critical part. Do not touch the firearm yourself. Do not handle it. Do not pick it up to hand it over. Tell the officer where it is, and let the officer retrieve it. It is in the center console. I am not going to touch it. You are welcome to secure it. Hands up, visible at all times. Because an individual handling a firearm in the presence of a police officer, even a legal gun owner doing exactly what the officer requested, creates a dangerous ambiguity that can justify an escalation you cannot undo. Officer safety covers a lot of ground. Do not give anyone a reason to invoke it. Let me come back to David for a moment. I told you what went wrong, but I want to tell you what he did afterward, because this is where the story gets useful. David called my office after that stop. He was shaken up. He was angry. He felt like he had done everything right and still ended up treated like a suspect. And in many ways, he had done everything right. He had a valid permit. He was not intoxicated. He was not carrying anything illegal. But what he had not done was separate the concept of being a good person from the concept of exercising his rights. He thought that a good person explains themselves, that a cooperative person answers every question, that transparency means full disclosure of everything, all the time, to everyone who asks. What he learned, and what I want you to take away from this, is that your rights exist precisely so that good people are not vulnerable to bad situations. The Fifth Amendment was not written for criminals, it was written for everyone, including people like David, including people like you. Knowing when to use it is not a sign of guilt, it is a sign of wisdom. After that conversation with me, David got educated. He learned his state's rules. He practiced what he would say. He ran through the scenarios. And 6 months later, when he got pulled over again, a different officer, a different state, the same question, David was ready. The stop lasted 8 minutes. He drove home. His family never even knew it happened. That is the version of this story I want for you. Here is what I need you to do after this. Look up your state's specific disclosure laws. Do not guess. Do not rely on what your buddy told you at the range, because your buddy might be right about his state and completely wrong about yours. Many states have their laws publicly available online through the Attorney General's website or the state legislature's website. If you cannot find it clearly, talk to a local attorney. Spend 30 minutes and $30 on a consultation. It is the cheapest insurance you will ever buy. Second, practice what you are going to say. Not because you think you will get pulled over, but because when you do, your brain will be flooded with adrenaline, and the words you rehearsed will come out much more cleanly than the words you are making up in the moment. Third, know a lawyer before you need one. I say this to everyone. Having a relationship with an attorney you trust, knowing that you have a number to call, changes how you navigate difficult situations. You make better decisions when you know there is someone in your corner. And fourth, remember the core truth of everything I have told you today. The side of the road is not where you win the argument. It is where you avoid the extra charges. Comply physically. Protect yourself verbally. Document everything you can remember immediately after. And if things go sideways despite your best efforts, stay calm, do not escalate, and call your attorney the moment you are able to. Now, before I close, I want to say something clearly because it matters to me professionally and personally. Everything I have shared with you today is general legal information. It is educational content. It is not legal advice, and I am not your attorney. Laws vary by state. Laws change, and your specific situation may have details that change the analysis entirely. What I have given you is a framework, a starting point, a way to think about these situations. If you are facing an actual legal issue or you have been charged with something, please consult with a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction who can give you advice specific to your circumstances. What I can tell you with complete confidence is this: the people who come through difficult situations at traffic stops, who keep a minor inconvenience from becoming a major legal problem, are almost always the people who know two things going in. They know the rules for their state, and they know their rights. The rest of it, the nerves, the questions, the pressure, all of it becomes manageable when you have already decided what you are going to say. So learn it now, practice it now, and the next time you see those red and blue lights in your mirror, you will not be scrambling to figure out what to do. You will already know. And remember, when in doubt, plead the fifth.